What's up, everyone? Today we're talking about the economy, or what the economy could be if we really let it be economical. My angle on the economy is that there should be more of an ecosystem. Obviously, the economy arose out of the resources that we needed, and then trade comes out of exchanging those resources, so exchanging what we have for what we need and finding a balance of the things that we're able to get through what we most easily have access to. So that's kind of like the baseline of what the economy is. Now that we've become so efficient at getting those base needs met, even though we're not distributing them very well, the possibilities of economy and of value obviously have become a lot more diverse, which is great for anyone who wants to really go deep into their rabbit hole and really explore how their personal view on the world could come into the world, how that could become material or have an influence on the material world and have an impact on the material world that changes it, usually for the better, ideally for the better. I mean, obviously a lot of business work and entrepreneurial work can be focused on profit, though I think this is a mistake on the part of the people who are doing it. I think they've mostly got the wrong end of the stick in terms of what success really means, and especially in terms of what fulfillment really is. Because I think it's only really fulfillment if you find the key that unlocks your special treasure chest of wisdom. And I think it's only really going deep into what experiences and things and people and achievements mean to you that you really find a sense of fulfillment, which is, I think, why a lot of people don't find fulfillment, but they don't find that sense of meaning, or the root of that sense of meaning that leads them to experiences and successes that really mean something to them personally. But I also think that the things that that we develop in that way, in terms of our own personal sense of meaning, only really gain a meaning if we do them in relationship to the world as well, and in communication with other people, and in regard to the state of the world. Because obviously we exist at this time, and that's kind of like the material that we have to, the raw material that we have to work with to mold value and mold the world into a state that we can be satisfied with and be proud of, or at least contribute to setting up for it to come to a better state through the people that come after us, etc., etc. So we're looking at like an ecosystem of value where everyone involved is in touch with what they really have to contribute to that ecosystem. If you think about a natural ecosystem, you know, trees give off oxygen and they consume carbon dioxide, and so we have an exchange of value there because we have something else that we need. But there are also insanely specific organisms out there, microorganisms, amphibians, whatever, birds, fish. Everything plays a different role in the environment and processes the material of the environment in a different way that the other organisms around them need. And they all adapt to each other so that they can find the best possible balance between their different ways of processing the world and contributing to the state of the environment. And it's the same with our forms of expression and forms of value, and the ways that we earn income and receive value from other people or exchange value with other people. But I think there's a lot more potential that hasn't quite been tapped yet, that is becoming more possible now because of the internet and because of certain social political events that are making it much more possible for people to become a lot more specific. And I think it's very far from being tapped to its fullest, which is cool because that means that's what's going to be happening from now. Though I also think that it's important for it not to just happen on the internet, or especially not just happen in media in a way that's going to keep the emphasis on media, because the emphasis is already so much on media that we're at risk of getting stuck in two-dimensional media. Which, I mean, like, we're stuck enough in three-dimensional reality as it is, so it seems stupid to go. Like, it doesn't seem to be contributing value to that ecosystem to get people more stuck in in a more narrow ecosystem. But anyway, I think it's easy for people to get the wrong idea about what value really is, and how important it is for it to be idiosyncratic, or to be really specific to who you are, and that who you are and what makes you valuable is not just the things that you think are cool about yourself. It's much deeper and more innate and essential than that. Like, your physical body is already a unique expression of what life is. And all of your dispositions and tendencies in the world are connected with your physical makeup. And so the makeup of your mind and your emotional life and your attitude and all those invisible, ephemeral parts of you that aren't strictly your body are still connected with the shape and dynamics of your physical body, because they're different forms of expression of the same entity that makes up you. And obviously the physical state that you give off is extremely important for the environment that you create with the people around you. And that is literally the ecosystem, it's the energy that is being exchanged between people that literally, physically, materially makes up the environment that you and we all live in. And especially that you live in with your peers and with your community, because those are going to be the people that you interact with the most and who have the most bearing on your well-being and your environment, and vice versa. And I think bringing the focus back to that really essential level of reality and acknowledging that you are part of reality and physically part of the ecosystem. The body isn't just a separate thing that moves through a neutral space of the world. On a material level, everything is just matter or energy in movement, and it's a pattern of movement within that. So everything that you do is already having an automatic effect on everything around you, which is why I think it's so important to understand that the state of your health is a really crucial part of the value that you contribute to the world. And it's not just in your personal relationships where having a good state of your energy or a good emotional state or a good mental state is going to be beneficial to the state of people around you because of the way you treat them and because of the way that your actions affect them. It's also the things that you'll see potential in and the things that you'll seek out to activate in the world. The whims that you have or the inspirations that you have to take different action in the world are completely different depending on the state of your health. And people don't really seem to, or a lot of people don't really seem to see the connection between what they're trying to achieve and the state of their well-being. Because if you don't cultivate a strong foundation in yourself and in your energy, then everything else that you do, including your emotional life and your mental capacity, your mental clarity and your creativity, is going to be shakier. You can have good ideas when you're not in a good mental state. But you can't continue to action really good, really important, really valuable content or material or impact on the world if it's not arising organically out of the environment, like your internal environment. Because the internal environment is a segment of the external environment. It's energy comes in, material comes in, and it's processed in a certain way, and then it comes out in a different form. And that goes for what you eat, what you breathe out, what you release into the world, the smells that you release into the world, and, the physical effects of the way that you move in the world. And you might think that those things are arbitrary. And you could probably name a lot of situations where they seem arbitrary. But if the principle of those actions is based on an unstable foundation, so if your absolute most fundamental state of health, of your physical health, is off, is out of balance, then there will be situations where it's going to matter. It'll matter in the thing that you say to someone. It'll matter in the way that you treat yourself. It'll matter in how much energy you consume and how much or how little energy you have left over to do things that you really need to do. The things that you miss and miss out on and fuck up are all connected to that internal stability. And because we have such a shallow and kind of segmented image of health in general society, people don't really understand that they're getting in their own way by not caring for that internal state. Like if you're having negative emotions, it is a physical imbalance in your body. The energy in your body and the way that your body is going to process and interact with energy is going to be off. And you can take that to as spiritual a level as you want. Like the sum of all the energy in the world or in the universe is going to be, however marginally, less balanced and less beautiful and less clean if your personal energy is not. But also think about how many other people are not doing what they could to be more healthy and more creative and more constructive towards solving the problems that we have in the world, or to creating new possibilities out of what we have. Because it's not all about solving problems, it's also about conceiving of new possibilities so that we can work towards them and bypass the problems that we have. But it goes so much further than eating and exercising. It goes down to the most subtle, invisible layers of your physical and mental and emotional being. If the seed of your energy or your energy signature is off, then the leaves and the branches and the fruits and the flowers are all going to be however slightly off in that way. But also the longer you go on in that state, the more it degrades and the imbalance becomes more obvious and more pronounced and more dominant in the things that you do. And so a lot of people want to focus on creating value or, their ambition or their achievement or their success now. And then they can think about themselves and get back to what's important to them or what feels good or what feels comfortable. And there's not anything wrong as such with doing that. But if you get to a point where you're depleted, it is a lot harder to take it back. And I've been there when I was focusing 100% of the time on writing when I was writing my first book. And I would just write every day until I was completely exhausted. And then I was like, why am I so anxious? Why is my mind always so overactive? Why can't I sleep? You know, why can't I remain calm or stable in a social situation? And I don't know why I couldn't see the connection between spending a huge amount of the day intensely focused on mental antics and not being able to wind down mentally and emotionally afterwards, and you know, having to deal with all the other emotional baggage that I was suppressing by only being in a mental mode. Just for example, physically too, being on the computer all the time and not really having a diverse range of movement. And then my behavior was just not stable. I offended people, I let people down, you know, like, even if I couldn't necessarily see it. I wasn't able to act in a way that I would be proud of and that I would respect if it was someone doing it to me. And I think especially in the long term, the value that you're able to cultivate over time is always going to be much more important. You know, like, that's your life work, is always going to be much more important than what you can do in the short term. And so if you run out of steam in the short term and then get off track and aren't able to keep it going, which I think happens for a lot of people, especially if they are trying to do something really new and different and interesting, or make a really big impact in a short amount of time, make a really large amount of money in a short amount of time. Then you get off track, and then what you are able to cultivate over the 10 or 20 years is going to be vastly less. And even if it takes longer to grow value in a stable and wholesome way, starting with your internal sense of value and your internal sense of self and letting it grow out of that, you're going to be able to really cultivate a part of your ecosystem that can really function in the world, because it's informed by all the experiences that you have over that time and all the things you're able to observe and all the things that you can learn in that time. And part of that, I think, is trying things and making mistakes and seeing what works and what doesn't. That is also super valuable. But again, if you burn out, then you lose a lot of time that you could have been spending building up your sense of value and your real legacy in the world, because you end up not being able to do anything. So I think it's super important for where we're at in society right now, where we have the opportunity to create really diverse forms of value, to step back even just a little bit from pushing into the future and pushing for that next gratification or that next achievement, so that we can keep some of that energy and time and focus and value for ourselves and for our own well-being and our own benefit. Because even if you're making a lot of money, if you're not using that profit to really grow your well-being and benefit your life experience and the possibility of life experience for your community or even a wider population of people, then what's it really worth? If you're only using your form of profit, usually money, but it could be anything, to grow that same form of profit and never feed it back into something more grounded and more healthy, more diverse, more open and accessible, you know, that feeds a more diverse and more balanced range of things in your environment and your world, then what is the real value of it? Like, what is it really contributing to the world if it only contains that value within the one direction that it's exploring? because I think it's really important for us to recognize different forms of profit and different types of skills in gaining profit, so that we're not all obsessing and competing over money. Because ultimately, money's only as good as what you gain with it or what you activate with it. And frankly, most people who are really after money only really use that to gain more money. Or the tree, the branches of impact or contribution from the value that they're creating stay within a closed loop of a type of value. And while I think it's important to develop value to a really high level, and that part of that is in going up or going onward in the same direction, I think once you achieve a certain level of understanding of what your type of value is, it's okay to open your eyes to what's happening around you and let it cross-contaminate a little bit. Otherwise, it's insular. It's like an isolated form of value, and it makes it harder for it to trickle down into the world. Like, one thing that I've noticed and that people have been saying to me recently is that I am able to get a lot of things done just by making connections with other people. And I got, not only me alone, but and with the support of a few other people, managed to get a house for free. We managed to get some work contributed for free. There are certain ways of engaging with the world that can produce profits that are more important than money, and where the profit is not even contained to the thing that you receive, but it can also be a seed in itself for contributing more value to other people. So we got this house for free, and we're turning it into a space where more people can explore their form of value and discover how they could most contribute value to the world, so that they can then grow enough to do that for a living, as their main means of engaging with the world. And it continues to contribute value from there. The more you open up the potential of value, it becomes like an exponential unfolding of value rather than a struggle for value. When a tree drops a fruit, it's not decided what's going to happen to that energy and that, information. There's a range of different things that could happen to it. It could be eaten by ants, but it could be eaten by a deer. You never really know. It could turn into another tree, but it might not. It might turn into nutrition. It might decompose and turn into a fungus that could be eaten by something else. Those are the kinds of value that we want to create in the world. Potential value, or value with a higher degree of potential, rather than value with a lower degree of potential. And money, although you can exchange it for a whole range of things, it is contained to a certain kind of level of society. And there are some things that you can't gain with money, or that when you try and gain them with money, it creates a negative dynamic with other people. And I think the longer human society continues into the future and continues to develop, it's going to become more and more important to recognize and retain those forms of value that we don't really explicitly state or represent now. Because we've all seen sci-fi movies that are about what would happen if we only value structure and bureaucracy and don't value any sort of freedom and creativity. Or, you know, what happens if we only value technology, but we don't value the other potentials for the development of human creativity and human skill and ability, you know, the Matrix. And for the other one, things like 1984 and Brazil and, you know, Orwellian bureaucratic future. Or what happens if we only focus on money and completely destroy the environment, or only focus on power and completely destroy the environment with some kind of nuclear war or nuclear fallout or whatever. The stories are all there. We know what's going to happen if we only privilege one form of value. And I think money is going to be okay if we allow it to be a baseline that's more freely exchanged for more important forms of value. But with the acknowledgement that it's the other forms of value that are important. And with the way things are heading now with working online and kind of new forms of media entrepreneurship, you know, like YouTubing and coaching and stuff like that, we have the potential for value to become even more diverse because we are starting to recognize and exchange forms of value that are less tangible, like knowledge and experience and support and skills that and talents that can't necessarily be seen, but they can be expressed. And when there's a platform for expressing them, then there's an opportunity for people who do recognize that form of value to engage with it. And I think that's the way that value becomes more visible. And I think if we use it well, we could head into a future and an economy and an ecosystem where everyone's value is recognized and it really is possible to be unique and have that value recognized even when it hasn't been seen before, even when it's completely different. I think it's possible for us to get to a stage where we presume that everyone has something really crucial to offer and look for it from the outset, rather than start with the template and disregard everyone who doesn't fit into it or who's not close enough to it. Because although it might feel good at the time to judge people and be like, oh, you're not good enough because you don't fit into my hierarchy of value, you know, because you get a sense of power out of being the person who judges or the person who decides and looks down on other people, you're actually cutting off the flow of nutrients to yourself. You know, the potential that they have to cultivate new value that would nourish you and enhance your life and your life experience in the future, if you allow it to grow, if you nurture it and give it space to grow and treat it with a sense of potential. But when you judge it and shut it down now, you're removing or lessening the possibility for you and everyone else to benefit from that value. But that's also why it's comes back down to mental and emotional, physical health. Because if we don't reconnect value with well-being, then we are going to cut off potential forms of value because we won't recognize them. You know, like if cultivating well-being is at the baseline of cultivating value, then we're going to see a lot more forms of value emerge because people will have the sense of safety and the comfort and the confidence to come out with their new ideas or their new sense of possibility and to experiment with ways of bringing value into the world. But you can't do that if you don't have the emotional slack or psychological slack to find the space or give yourself the space to play around and see what happens. And you only really look down on other people and cut people down and judge people when you don't feel enough in yourself, because we treat people the way that we treat ourselves. So it's a matter of your health as well. If you're in a state where you are creating divisions between yourself and other people, or creating divisions between people based on what they're doing or what they look like or the way they try and express themselves, then you've got a concern for your own well-being, which by extension is going to impact your physical and mental health. And that is directly impacting the way that you contribute value to the world. Because if you're not able to nurture other people and help other people cultivate value, then you're reducing the amount of value in the world. So that's why I've decided to put my main focus onto health and the way that health impacts work and business and value. Because first and foremost, we need to be getting to that state where we ourselves are stable and healthy before we try and be telling people what to do or trying to make an impact on the world. Because look at the people who have not been in a stable mental and emotional state but have gone to the extreme of making an impact on the world. Can you think of any? Hitler, Marx, Putin, Donald Trump. You know, admittedly done major things, had a major impact, but because the imprint that they're making with that major impact, you know, the shape that they're bringing to that impact is imbalanced, then while it could have had a lot of potential for value, the negative impact is a lot greater. And that we've seen that, and that's the way that history is going to remember it. So the way that you go forward into the world and into the future is so dependent on your state of health. It's the only real way for us to progress into a future that's going to be balanced and open and accessible and have the potential to continue on. Now, I know a lot of that sounded like abstract concepts. And just because I tell you that it's important to improve your health and connect your health to your sense of value and your creativity and your impact on the world doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to. But that's why I've also been developing resources for people to start developing that awareness and developing the ability to manage their own health, you know, your own health, your own energy, and your own relationship with the world on a more fundamental level, on a deeper level, and a more essential level, more important level. Because I know how hard it can be to get started with that, because when I was at my lowest point of physical and mental and emotional health, I pretty much had no idea what to do. And I didn't think that there would be anyone who could help me. I didn't think there would be anyone who would know what to do, because I was at such a point of crisis. But I think most of the people who are watching this probably won't be quite as bad as I was, which means that it's going to be a lot easier for you to get back on top of your health, because all you really need to do is locate the parts of yourself which are getting out of balance, or which have a tendency for getting out of balance, and the signs that you see when it's starting to go into the part of your cycle where it's out of balance, and shift the habits that perpetuate that cycle. But so I've got a group where people can ask questions and develop more of an internal health practice and get more familiar with what health really means and how health is different and unique from person to person, and techniques for improving health and establishing a baseline of health. And I've got a couple of video courses up on my website at the moment too, depending on how far in the future you're seeing this. And I'm always open for messages and online sessions for people who need that direct engagement. So don't waste your opportunity to make the future a super cool, magic, amazing place. And for that to be the future that you experience, for that to be your life experience, rather than, you know, the struggle and suffering and competition of, you know, the dominant mode of the world that we've got now.